I'd like to invite our next presenter, who's going to be from the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, Mr. Horace Glaze, who is Senior Director at ODPEM, to come and give us a presentation on disaster management and recovery, lessons learned from Tropical Storm Gustav, and the way forward. Mr. Glaze.
As you can see, my presentation this morning will be on the lessons learned from Tropical Storm Gustav, as well as highlighting what we, ODPEM, see as the way forward as it relates to disaster management for Jamaica, and more specifically for ODPEM as an organization. We look at the lessons learned and the priorities for 2009-2011, and of course the way forward. Lessons learned from Tropical Storm Gustav. There's the need to enhance real-time monitoring and early warning capabilities on critical rivers, and you're looking at putting in real-time sensors. There are a number of areas that the WRA, the Water Resource Authority, has some of these capabilities, and what we want to do is build on these resources, especially in areas such as the Rio Cobre, the Hope River, and the Bog Walk, right? Because those are areas that we have serious situations arising, even when there is just a heavy rain, event, not just a tropical storm or a hurricane or an intensive hurricane. And so that need there to build on these early warning capabilities so that we can have early warnings for persons, particularly the residents that live in these areas and the motorists who are braving the floodwaters in a lot of these areas and putting themselves and others at risk. Greater modeling and forecasting capabilities required. Again, looking at areas such as the Hope River Valley. More training required at the local level in incident command systems, swift water rescue, and emergency operations management. We have been doing some training in this regard, especially with our response agencies, the police, the Ministry of Health, and other areas. But coming out of a few of our simulation exercise, tabletop exercise, and full-scale exercises, which we embarked on, notably the parish exercise for St. Anne and St. Mary, and a few other tabletop exercises carried out by ODPEM. We recognize the need for greater command as it relates to the management of incidents, and how that central control at the local level to coordinate all the efforts of the various agencies, that to an extent is absent. And though various agencies have been individually trained, right, that there still seems to be, that sense of persons don't know really who is in command on the ground at an event, and that lends to the fostering around as it relates to mobilizing resources. Swift water rescue, we have embarked on some training in boat handling for some communities. We have done some training in the Old Harbor Bay area and in the Duane River areas early as the second quarter of this year, and we hope to embark on similar exercises in other areas. Much of the losses experienced result from poor infrastructure maintenance and environmental degradation, right? And we see that daily. There's an impact on the housing sector, primarily within the informal housing sector, to substandard housing conditions, right? A lot of the areas in which we have severely damaged houses and those that are totally destroyed are in this area, the informal sector, right? Primarily because of persons building substandardly. You have persons, the relevant authorities did not approve these buildings, and so the required engineering and construction techniques that should have been employed were absent, which led to those severe damages in a lot of these areas. Again, exposed the vulnerability. This, of course, exposed the vulnerability of the government infrastructure. You look at incidents, as I mentioned, the gorge, which was significantly damaged in Tropical Storm Gustav, and the level of work that needs to be putting at our critical infrastructures. You're looking at areas such as the Palisados, which the government is embarked on doing some work currently, but it's having a broad look at all our critical infrastructures. From time to time, you hear of persons being blocked in areas such as Junction and other areas. So it's really having a thorough assessment of our critical infrastructure, primarily our transportation routes and other infrastructures, to see how best we can reduce the vulnerability in these areas and provide adequate mitigation projects to mitigate against these risks. Consequences of poor planning and lack of enforcement, that again stemming from issues related to substandard housing, degradation of the environment and other conditions. Investment in damage assessment training at the community level, that of course paid off. For some years now, we have been trying to work with the communities and the local agencies in initial damage assessment training to provide that quick response after an incident of what the rough situation is, and just a preliminary assessment as to the damages that have occurred and the immediate needs would be in these areas. And so that paid off, but we still need to put some more investment in those areas, build on the training that was done to several communities, bring it to other communities that were not a part of that exercise, as well as integrate a number of other NGOs and agencies into the process of damage assessment. The need to further the strengthening of emergency relief capacity, and again looking at the approach to focus on smaller number of shelters resulted in greater success in shelter management process. What we did prior to this hurricane season was to have a second look at the shelters across the island, and we asked the local authorities through the parish disaster committees to identify what we want to term as priority shelters. Those shelters that from time to time, based on the various events, even just consistent showers, that those shelters in the communities where persons are most likely to be sheltering, not just for hurricane, but any significant shower events or so on that will cause, or that will involve the communities that are most vulnerable, that are regularly flooded by rain events and so on. So we looked at those and identified them as priority shelters and partnered with agencies such as the Red Cross and MLSS to mobilize resources to have those shelters up and running as soon as there's a perceived threat of any event. And so that worked well for us. And what we need to do is build on that capacity as it relates to emergency relief, looking at our warehousing capacity, and not just at the national level, because part of the challenge we face is providing the resources to mobilize relief supplies for an event. And so we want to move to regionalizing resources as it relates to building our emergency relief capacity, and strengthening the local authorities to take on disaster risk management as an integral part of their responsibilities.